Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Ask Sharifah Videocast and Podcast. I have yet another amazing show for you today, but before we get too far into the show, I'm going to ask you to do what I always ask you to do and go ahead and share this show because friends don't let friends miss out on Ask Sharifah. Today's guest is a former member of the South Carolina House of Representatives. He is also the 2014 Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in his life and also his new book, My Vanishing Country. Please help me welcome Mr. Bakari Sellers. Good afternoon, Bakari. How are you?
I'm more blessed than I deserve. Let me first just start by saying thank you for allowing me to come on this show and use your platform to talk about my new book, My Vanishing Country. And you didn't have to say yes, you didn't have to allow me to come on, but I'm grateful. And let me also apologize. You may hear one of my twins. I have 16-month-old twins running around this house listening to Blues Clues, and so we're trying to manage everything. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm glad to be here with you. So I'm grateful for that.
I'm grateful to have you. It's an honor and it's a privilege. So one of the questions that I have been asking lately is, you have small children. Before this global epidemic, were they at home or is this something new for you? Are you now like Mr. Mom?
So they were always home. Daddy wasn't always home though, because I was always traveling. I spent 3 or 4 days a week in the airport on an airplane flying around the country, whether or not it was speaking or for CNN or for practicing law. I'm really grateful though to be able to spend this time with them. It's time that, just means so much to me. And to them, I think, just waking up every morning and being there to fix breakfast and watch them grow up and learn new things that I would have missed if I was on the road traveling. Now I do wish I could get out of the house a little bit more, but I'm happy to be here with them. And I have a 14-year-old daughter who is learning how to drive now. And as you hear the pitter patter of little feet, come say hey. Come here. You want to come say hey? This is one. Oh, don't bump your head, buddy. This is Stokely, named after Stokely Carmichael. Say hello, Stokely.
Hello, how are you?
He's been eating soup all day. And so, yes, go. That's your show. So just learning this new work environment with kids and dogs and everything else. And my book came out this week too. So it's just a lot going on and I'm appreciative of every single moment.
Absolutely. But you mentioned your book came out recently. Was it actually planned to release now, or is this one of those incidents where you said, you know what, there's so much going on in the country, I think this is the ideal time for me to release my book?
So uniquely enough, most people have pushed their books back during the nobody plans to release their book during the middle of a pandemic. A lot of shows canceled because they were only talking about COVID-19. There were a lot of things going on. But no, and the crazy part about My Vanishing Country is that it's somewhat evergreen because we talk about systemic racism and we talk about systemic injustices, the same thing that COVID has shown the world, that Black people dealing with these comorbidities and preventable illnesses are caused by those systemic injustices and racism. You see, now he's having a full conversation about systemic injustice and racism. But also with the death of Ahmaud Arbery and the death of Breonna Taylor. And so whether or not my book came out 4 months early or 4 months later, I think it's right on time. I think it's something that these issues we should always talk about and try to have some understanding to address.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about My Vanishing Country. What was your motivation? I know you talked about systematic racism, but what happened when you said, you know what, I have to write about this. I have to be, to put this out there.
So uniquely enough, I got turned down for this project so many times because I was trying to write a political book like many of my colleagues at CNN have done, a political book in the age of Trump. Nobody wanted to buy that. We did the proposal, we did the sample chapter, we did all of those things, and it just didn't sell. And I sat down. There was a young lady, Tracy Sharifah, who gave me an opportunity. She is over the Amistad imprint of HarperCollins, and she sat me down and said, "Tell me your story." I told her my story, and she invited me back to the HarperCollins headquarters, and I met with Judith Kerr and Patrick Bass, and the three of them. They just wanted me to pitch myself, and I did. And they said, we're going to get you. You have to tell this story, not a political book, but you have to tell this story. And so my book it chronicles a life of trauma, some triumph, but a great deal of trauma. Going back to not only being raised in the poor rural South, but going back to the most important day of my life. And I say it's February 8th, 1968, although it was nearly 20 years before I was born. That day is so important to me. It's the day my father was shot protesting.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's the day that 3 young men were killed: Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton. 28 were wounded on the campus of South Carolina State College. My father was actually arrested. He was deemed to be an outside agitator. All the officers were found not guilty, and my father ended up going to prison as a result of that night's violence. He was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting, becoming the first and only one-man riot in the history of this country. And so we go through that. We go through the trauma of living with that. It's a love story to my father, a love story to my mother for her perseverance, a love story to South Carolina, in the rural South. We go through the Charleston massacre, where I lost my good friend Clemente Pinckney, who was the pastor, Mother Emanuel AME Church. And then we go through, the birth of my twins and almost losing my wife. African-American female mortality is a serious issue, one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And so I guess I illustrate that my trauma may not be your trauma, but as long as we understand each other, we can kind of get through this together. And that's my goal. And that's why I wrote my Vanishing Country.
One of the things that happen is that when people go through injustices in certain places, they tend to either want to get away from it completely, not even be in that place, because they feel like it's never going to change, especially in the rural South. It's always going to be this way. This is the way it is. Or like yourself, they say, okay, well, how can I be a part of the solution? Was there a part of time when you felt that maybe you should just leave as opposed to trying to make a difference?
I couldn't leave. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. My father was a member of SNCC. I grew up around Stokely Carmichael and Julian Bond and Kathleen Cleaver and love Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer. There was no leaving. There was only centering yourself, being intentional and purposeful, and dedicating yourself to continuing this journey for justice. It's overwhelming. I talk about anxiety in the book and kind of come out telling people that I suffer from anxiety. And it's just this is a unique and challenging time where we have to have difficult conversations, and I hope my Vanishing Country sparks those conversations.
Yes, you not only speak about the civil rights and systematic slavery and injustice. Your story is very traumatic. I know a lot of people may not necessarily have your experience. It seems somewhat rare, right? Because you have a lot of different instances. You have your father, you have your best friend, you have your wife's story, and then where you bring it up today. What is it that you want people to take away from the book?
So I think Black folk will take away a sense of pride, hopefulness, and perseverance. I think white folk, when they read it, they're going to get some understanding. Bishop Jakes, we had a conversation recently, and Bishop Jakes, in all his wisdom, said, you can teach people arithmetic and you can teach people English language, you can teach them Spanish, but you can't teach them Blackness. And so I hope white people read this book with an open heart and an open mind and help us get some understanding. That's first. I think that with that understanding, hopefully we get to the point where we can have honest conversations about tough issues. I hope we can get to the point where we have some level of compassion and empathy, and we begin to look at our neighbors and give them the benefit of their humanity. See, Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery didn't get the benefit of their humanity. People of color don't drink clean water and breathe clean air because they don't get the benefit of their humanity. Our people go to school where heating and air doesn't work, infrastructure is falling apart because they don't get the benefit of their humanity. Black women die at higher rates, 4 times higher rates than white women during childbirth because they don't get the benefit of their humanity. And so my goal is that my children can grow up in a country where they can be free, and they will get compassion, they'll get empathy, they'll get understanding, and they'll get the benefit of that humanity.
That's beautiful. You have such a kind heart. I mean, I can just feel it in everything that you're saying, that you're more concerned about other people than even for yourself, which is part of the civil rights movement, that you have people who are willing to go on the front line, not for themselves and sacrificing themselves for other people. One of the things that we have in 2020 and probably the most recent years that we didn't have before was the whole wild black, whatever it was, walking while black, going to the store while black, because we tend to have a different experience. We watch videos on social media all the time, people having barbecues in the park while black, but things that ordinary people or other people per se just do on a natural basis. It's like when black people do it, it's perceived in a different light. So with your book, I am hopeful that it will cast a light on, you know, those conversations and those communications, because race is a very difficult conversation to have. Do you have any recommendations on other ways to start the conversation?
Well, you can't start the conversation with the most sensitive topics, and you also have to meet people where they are.
Mhm.
You have to get to know people on some very fundamental, universal type platforms. And so I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I can say that when we attempt to have some level of other people's struggles,
Mhm.
and when we give them credence, a part of the problem is that when you're having this conversation about race, a lot of white folk like to confine that conversation to their lifetime
Mhm.
and say, well, in my, this doesn't exist anymore. We've had a black president, this, that, and the third, without necessarily acknowledging the trauma that goes with, 400 years, hundreds of years of slavery, 400 years of being in this country, decades upon decades of Jim Crow lynching. And, I start the book talking about my father's admiration from Mamie Till, who was Emmett Till's mother. So you go from Emmett Till to Jimmy Lee Jackson to Medgar Evers. You fast forward and you're Walter Scott, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Tamir Rice. You're at Eric Arbery, and you're Breonna Taylor. And so it just, this trauma seems to be never ending. And I'm just asking for you not to, before we even get to some level of atonement, I'm asking you simply to understand what it means to be black in this country. And my Vanishing country explores that. My son throws everything. So just
It's okay. I love children. That's like the thing. I can't wait to be a grandmother. My kids are older, so I love it. I love the sound of the pitter patter of little feet. But Bakari, if I can make a judgment, right? When I look at you, and I kind of feel like this sense of sadness, like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Whereas other people may have felt like anger, like they've taken away my father, they've taken away my friend. And a lot of people will say, as black people, we are easy to anger. Like we're like get mad, go riot, as opposed to finding a way to start the conversation. But was there a point where you were angry?
I'm still angry. I mean, I think that you can be angry and sad, but anger is not a sin. I don't want black folk to think they can't be angry.
Mhm.
When Dylan Roof killed Clemente Pinckney, when Dylan Roof walked into Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and killed 9 people, I'm still angry at him. I know that a lot of people forgave him, but I haven't. I mean, I'm not that far along yet in my Christian journey. I should let that go, but I can't.
Mhm.
You coming up on Father's Day, and these children won't be able, and Clem's daughters won't be able to fix them breakfast on Father's Day. That
Mhm.
makes me angry. However, the way you utilize those emotions is probably the most valuable. You, I talk about anxiety in the book a lot. I call it a black man's superpower. And do you utilize that fear which is sometimes irrational, to propel you to success, or do you allow it to paralyze you? It's the same thing with anger. Do you allow it to paralyze you, or do you allow it to, do you use it for some sort of greater good?
Mhm. So was the book cathartic to you?
It was very cathartic. I was more anxious about it getting out into the world. I was anxious about it getting out into the world because you go through these phases when you write a book. First, you get the book, you write. So this book had to be written quicker than most.
Mhm.
I wrote in like 4 to 5 months.
Mhm.
For those watching who are writers or have projects and wanted to be writer, I always tell people take take 15 minutes a day, at minimum, 15 minutes a day, and sit down and write. Utilize your email to yourself, utilize your voice memo, etc. That's kind of the first thing. This book had to be written in 4 to 5 months, and then you go through this phase where you don't have anything. You kind of go through the last minute edits, and then finally at your doorstep you get the hard copy, right? And you're like, finally it's here. And then you go through this phase like, I really want people to read this book. And now you're at the phase like, oh my God, people are about to read this book. And so it's like you go through all of these various stages, and now we're here. I vividly remember spending 4 days in the studio reading this book for my Audible because I wanted to narrate it myself. And it was tough. My throat was hurting. You forget how to read. I mean, you're sitting there just trying to, if you sit there for hours and hours and just read pages out loud, I mean, you forget how to read. But it's just something I wanted to do. So I'm really thrilled and excited about, the product that we put out. And if it changes a life or two, then I feel like I've done my job.
I mean, just with or without the book, I feel like you've changed lives and you affected lives because it seems that you have a voice. Just mentioning writing real quick. Are you one of those people who write and edit? Because I was always told that the best way is to get the thought out, like just write it and write it and write it.
I just write. I don't do the writing and editing because you shouldn't edit yourself, by the way. For everybody out there who thinks they're the best editor of their own stuff, you are lying. That's like you lying to you, and you're gonna lie to everybody else. You're gonna put out a bad product. That's like you can't be the judge of your food, right? You run around talking about my food is delicious. No, that's not how this works. Somebody else has to call your food delicious. And so no, I get it all out. I get it out on paper, voice recording, transcribing those things, memos, that type of stuff is all the most things you can do.
Okay, so I understand, or at least I'm learning a little bit about your story, but tell us why you decided on the name My Vanishing Country.
That's a good question. I've been answering that question a lot. It was kind of cool. This book came out on Malcolm X's birthday. I had no idea that was going to be when it came out. But My Vanishing Country means a few things. One, this boy on the front, this is me. I'm 6 years old. I'm sharing this with you. Nobody else has asked the question, but I'm actually preparing to go to a summer league basketball game. So that's why I have my high tops on, my socks, and my jersey, my t-shirt jersey there, kind of with this stern look. My father took that picture, and we're sitting in front of my home in Denmark, South Carolina. My Vanishing Country, you come from these communities that once were filled with promise and opportunity, economic upward mobility for people of color. And now those windows are shuttered. What once had small businesses thriving are no more. That those communities, those small communities, which were the lifeblood of our country, are now vanishing before our eyes. So that's first. The second thing is the promise of this country. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, justice, freedom, love, those not so tangible ideals are vanishing because they're not really readily available to all of us. If you're Black, brown, immigrant, disabled, they care about who you love, who you pray to. A lot of times those it's not promised to you. And so those promises are vanishing. Our country is not fulfilled it has not fulfilled the check that it's supposed to give to each one of its citizens.
So it seems that it's something that you're passionate about right now. What are some of the things that you're doing in order to get this country back, or this vision of the way you see it?
So not only am I utilizing my platform every day on CNN and writing this book, but I'm trying to be a really good example. Black folk, especially, always ask me, what can I do in my community? I said, the number one thing you can do is be an example. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want people because I don't want to be a leader who creates followers. I want to be a leader who creates other leaders to go out there and change the world. And so I'm heavily involved in everything that goes on in my community. I'm always raising awareness on certain issues from, African-American female mortality, women's reproductive rights, challenging this country to issues of environmental justice and criminal justice, economic justice, healthcare justice. So being a voice and utilizing my platform that God gave me to lift up those voices who have been screaming for a long time but have gone unheard.
One of the things I've seen, and if it was any other time aside from this time, COVID-19 global pandemic, I would have a different view maybe on the country. I would have said, I think I was a little bit more naive in that, oh my God, like there are opportunities everywhere. You just have to look, you have to look around. But what I have seen during this time frame is the minorities have been affected more by COVID-19, mainly because of for other reasons. And I'm not a doctor, but I have seen personally part of that reason being their access to the healthcare, their access to the resources that they need to be healthy. But I've also seen their access to resources like finances. One of the conversations we were having is about, these PPP loans.
Right.
And companies taking them, like the Lakers and large companies who are taking them, and they're not going to the small businesses. So if they're large companies, then these are not minority owned or even minority led companies. So to me, it created a greater divide than ever before. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you deserve your own gig on CNN because you were echoing the same.
I'll take it.
You were echoing the same things that I've been saying for a very long period of time. It's these systemic problems we've had in our community for so long, which lead. I live in my hometown, which I talk about is in a food desert. It means you can't go 2 miles, 3 miles to get access to clean fruit, healthy fruits and vegetables. No hospital, no clean water. The air you're drinking is, the air you're breathing is polluted. So, you're going to have preventable illnesses. You're going to have comorbidities, right? And so, people want to turn a blind eye to that, but COVID-19 is saying no. And my dad would always say, you probably heard the saying before. I know it's not a Southern saying. You've heard the saying before. When America gets a cold, Black folk get the flu. Well, now when America gets coronavirus, Black folk die. And the reason being is because we are going through these. We had these systemic injustices that have been plaguing us, and now you can see it. We have data to back it up. You can't turn a blind eye to it. But people are proving you can't turn a blind eye to it because all they're doing right now is reopening government and not caring about those who are dying.
You have been very interesting, and I have so many more questions. But before that, I'm definitely going to read the book. So please let us know where we can pick up our copy.
So My Vanishing Country, I want you to go. You can go to your independent bookstore. We got to support the indies. You can go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or you can just go to Amazon and do the one click. Please go get it. It'll be a great Father's Day. Order it for some young people in your life. This book is my heart, and I put everything I had into it. So please give My Vanishing Country a chance.
Definitely. Now, Bakari, what I love to do at the end of every show is just allow my guests the opportunity to speak directly to the audience, to speak to everyone who's watching live, as well as everyone who's watching this in the archives, and just let them know what you want them to take away from your appearance.
Well, I know we were talking about me and my project, but I just want to let people know that I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for you for letting me utilize this platform. And my goal in life is for my children to be free, and one day we'll meet at the top.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Again, I feel your heart, I feel your spirit, and I just hope a lot of people come to you. Like, I just really see people just drawn to you to help you, so that you're not, I know it's other people around, but that you're not carrying this weight on your own. It's always easier and better when we go together, and we definitely go further when we go together. Bakari, I would like to thank you for being a guest on today's episode. You are so welcome. I want to thank everyone who tunes into the show and who's watching it live or in the archives. If you're interested in being a guest, please visit the website at asharifah.com. Until then, everyone have a blessed day. Bye now.